welcome back. So the story that I promised to tell you about Jacqueline, well, it involved her looking really dodgy. I know, not now, but in the video she looks really dodgy, and there's a knock at the door. Well, it's like some dodgy 1970s porno movie, because she's deliberately looking rough rather than purposely looking rough. And the dog groomer turned up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon while she was
in my dressing gown.
In your dressing gown with your hair all over the place and a pair of dark glasses. And the groomer just looked at you as if to say, oh my God, what have I walked into? And you said,
well, look, I'm sorry, I've just got to hand you the dog. I need to get back. I'm making a film on Zoom. He then gave me another look. And I said, but it's not a porno. I'm just doing this little funny skit. At which point he just took the dog and went.
Yeah. It's a good job there aren't some sort of dog protective services, because I've got a funny feeling they'll have taken the dog off you.
Oh, my God.
In fact, I'll give Alison a ring in a minute and see if there's a criminal offence.
Unfortunately, the window cleaner's turned up.
That dressing gown alone was a criminal offence. Now, welcome back to the awards. Let's hear from another of our very generous sponsors. Please say hello to the editor of Cheshire Life and Lancashire Life, Joanne Goodwin.
Hello. Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Good. Well, I can't take credit for Lancashire Life, but I am the editor of Cheshire Life. So firstly, a thank you to Jacqueline and the team for organising this event today. Wonderful as always. Great double act presenting and some brilliant recipients of awards so far. Cheshire Life and Lancashire Life have a really long association with the Inspiring Women Awards, and we're really proud of this enduring relationship and hope that next year we can all meet in person. It's fantastic to spend the afternoon in the company of all you inspiring women. And in reality, for me, it's fantastic to spend every day in the company of inspiring women, whether that's my colleagues at Cheshire Life, my family and friends, neighbours, teachers I know, doctors, nurses, business owners, artists, volunteers, mums, grandmothers, all the remarkable women who achieve in so many ways and inspire me every day. Cheshire Life and Lancashire Life fill their pages with people stories of those who hold our communities together, who work hard to raise families and businesses, who juggle a million commitments and who make other people's lives better. And I have to say, the majority of those people are women. So thank you again, Jacqueline, for your splendid work over so many years of organising these awards that recognise just a few of these women. And here's to all us women, and long may we inspire each other. Thank you.
Who's that head behind you?
Okay, so that's somebody who doesn't inspire me, but who I take my frustrations out occasionally and tweak his nose, and it's a Donald Trump mask.
We did wonder, actually, if it was. So. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
Sorry, we've lost Mary because I did a bit of an ad-lib there when I shouldn't have done. So can we bring Mary? Sorry, Mary, we weren't talking about you.
Yeah, because that would be really rude if Joanne took her annoyances out on Mary's head.
It would. So we've just brought you in, Mary, to show that you're real, you're here, and it's obviously we're going to show a bit of a clip of our interview earlier this week, or a couple of weeks ago, I suppose, if we're honest. But we do want to say, and please reiterate this, no question is off the table.
That's correct.
So a bit later on, we've got a Q&A with Mary. She says she's heard it all before. There is no question that you can ask her that will shock her, because she's had everything asked. And today is the day. So please take notes, because you'll need to.
Sounds like we're making this a challenge.
Yes.
Accepted.
So Michelle, at the end of this tape, will sort of give you some guidance on how to actually put your chat button in and where it is and all the rest of it. That's too technical for me. So,
by the way, I can't guarantee I will answer the question, but you can ask anything you like, yes.
Mary, you said you would.
I said I would try.
So I met you, Mary, about 8 years ago when you contacted me with regards to a possible collaboration, and I took myself off to Edinburgh to meet you, and I remember we were in a park for some reason having a coffee, but what I did remember was that the conversation didn't turn out quite as expected when you shared your true story with me, and that story is being married to a bigamist and psychopath, of falling in love and having children with an abuser, a fraudster, a cheat, a thief, a controller. And then there was worse to come. And by the way, in case you're wondering, Mary is a member of Mensa with an IQ of 148. So if it can happen to her, girls, we can only scratch the surface of this fascinating story today. And I would urge you to read her books. Sorry, is that... can see, Bigamist and Psychopath, because honestly, truth is stranger than fiction. As I say, Mary's joining us a bit later for the Q&A. Make your notes. No question off the table. Let's hear your story, Mary. I just want for you to describe what your life was like in around about October 2000.
Sure, yeah. I mean, before all this happened, I was a single mum. I had a nearly 1-year-old daughter. I was self-assured, confident, had a job as a business advisor. I used to describe myself as a professional busybody because I used to go into people's companies and tell them how to run them better, which was a great fun job. So I sort of traveled all over doing that. And so I had money in the bank. I had a property of my own. I really kind of had it all, except a partner. I wasn't really particularly bothered about it, but my friends kept saying, "Oh, you need to go and find love again." Sort of like there's something missing in your life. You need to go find it. So there was this newfangled thing that had just come out called internet dating, and so they said, "Why don't you try it? What could possibly go wrong?" It always makes me laugh thinking about it now. But yeah, so I thought, well, I'll give it a try and just see what happens. And met a couple of guys, didn't work out. So I kind of backed off from it. And then I got this email from this guy who said he was mixed race American, spent his life chasing his career around the globe, so hadn't had any kids. In fact, hadn't had a marriage or anything. But then he said couldn't have kids because he had mumps as a child and therefore had been told that he was infertile. Just very chatty, very friendly, charismatic. And we got along, we hit it off, and yes.
and your story is not a sort of quick 3-month love bombing. No. Let's see how much money we can get out of this person. Yeah. This actually lasted six years plus, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And the ramifications lasted a lot longer.
Yeah, they will last a lifetime. But it was. We met up and we were engaged for 2 years, and we were married for 4 years. So although he actually asked me to marry him within 3 weeks of meeting him, which is all the kind of love bombing stuff. And sort of like, I mean, there's so many, as you say, there's so many aspects to this story. It's like, depends what parts you want to cover. He convinced me that he was working for the intelligence services, and he did this by saying, suspension of disbelief. He said, you don't have to believe it just now; it'll all be proved in time. But he didn't say, "Hey baby, I'm a spy." What he said was he was an IT guy, and he said he was one of the guys in the van. So he wasn't not nearly as glamorous as it sounds. It was just a very practical job, but it did call him away quite a lot. And it's after he told me about it, I would get phone calls from his colleagues saying that he'd been called away. I would get text messages on my phone from MOD Relay and ODCI Relay, both of which were the areas he was working in. And it just, all the technology backed up. He used to carry a gun. He used to be paid in money packets that were marked with MOD, things like that. So there was a lot of evidence that sort of backed up what he was saying. So I fully believed that he actually worked for the intelligence services. And one thing I 100% believed was that he was a loyal, faithful, loving husband.
And was that because of the way he treated you, or was that partly the person you are, that you would trust someone when you commit to someone, that's it?
Yeah, I mean, I the level of deception that he does, it didn't enter into my world. I didn't have a clue that anyone could be that deceptive, and that committed to being that deceptive. But yeah, and it's also because I would never have considered a lying like that. So it kind of didn't come into my field of understanding. Sort of like didn't enter into my mind. I've been around people who had been, drug dealers or, dodgy characters and stuff like that. And those I can spot. It's a very different kind of scenario. Whereas this guy was quiet, he was humble, he was, he would say things like, oh, I can play the piano a bit. And so you go, right, so I used to play concerts when I was 11. So I said, sit down, play, show me. And he could play better than I could. And then he'd say, oh, well, I did a little bit of martial arts. And then he would sort of demonstrate doing a 6-foot kick and kicking the light bulb, And it's just like, so he would always say less than he could do and demonstrate better, if that makes sense. So when he would say something as quite outrageous as, I work for the intelligence services, it rang true. If that makes any sense.
It does.
So,
it does.
and certainly, sort of like the way he talked about people who were unfaithful and the way he talked about men who didn't look after their children because, he thought he couldn't have kids, So, it was a really big deal that he felt that, he couldn't, how could any man walk away from his child? It was just, mind boggling to him, and it was all the things he said and all the things when he was with me, he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. So it's the love bombing, gaslighting. So it's just, it just keeps you going like that.
So at what point? So you met in the November. After 3 weeks, he's asking you to get engaged. At what point did he start to tell you about the CIA and his lifestyle? Did that leak out, or was it a sit-down moment?
It was a sit-down moment, and I discovered some information and was kind of presenting him with it, and was in the process of once again about to dump him. So we got to this kind of breaking point, and that's when he sat down and said, I've been given permission to tell you. And he said basically he was recruited out of school and put through university doing IT, specializing IT by the security services. And he was basically, that was his job. It wasn't as I say, it wasn't glamorous at all. It was just really practical. And, sort of like it allowed him to travel the world and stuff like that. But yeah, it was definitely a sit down moment.
And at this point, did you think, did it cross your mind, this is a bit odd, or did you think, no, this is totally plausible? Yeah, everything's great.
No, absolutely. I thought it was a bit odd. I mean, who wouldn't? I was sitting there going, excuse me, what? But one of the things he said it's very clever, because one of the things he said at the beginning of the conversation, he said, don't ask any questions until the end. Just hear me out all the way through, and then you can ask me questions, but let me tell you all about this. So first of all, I was kind of holding back the immediate questions. And secondly, he actually said, you do not have to believe anything I'm telling you. All right. All you have to do is just wait, because all the proof will come. And, that's what happened basically. So I kind of I finished the conversation with him that day, just going, okay, well, let's wait and see what happens. But yes, I was incredulous about it. But then, I got phone calls from people saying, telling me that that's what he did. I got, sort of like just everything that happened afterwards just supported what he said.
And do you now realise those were accomplices, or? Yes. Yeah.
So okay. They were A, accomplices, and B, could be just random people that he'd asked to say certain things on the phone that they didn't know what the context was.
Right.
So there were accomplices. His family were accomplice. So certainly his parents helped him and helped set up other victims as well. But yeah, there were random people who, occasionally, for instance, I get a phone call saying, but from some stranger saying he's been called away, just to let you know. And it could be that he stopped people in the street and said, I want to go and buy my wife a present, but I'll be late home. Could you possibly just phone her and say that, you know, I've been called away and I'll be home as soon as I can, kind of thing.
Of
Because he'd
course.
set it up as a kind of code that I would understand, then it could really be anybody saying anything.
And was he shrinking your life at this point as well, in terms of the secrecy?
It's, I mean, one of the main tool of any abuser is keep your victims silent. So, you know, one of the main things they have to do with coercive control is make sure you can't tell anyone else, either through shame or through, you know, sort of like through, in my case, empathy. So what he used in my case was that if I told anyone or talked to anyone about this, I would effectively put them in danger. You know, and he used to say things like, you know, they would never, you know, so somebody trying to get information about him wouldn't necessarily approach me. What they would do is put a child in my sister's child's nursery. And then that person, my sister, would bond, and they'd say, oh, my husband's away a lot. And she'd go, oh, my sister's husband's away a lot as well. But, you know, it's okay because he does this, that, and the other. So I wasn't allowed to tell anyone because they might inadvertently put him in danger, if that makes any sense.
It does.
So it was it's very intricate, and it's very, I mean, this is, as you can see, this is why I had to write the books about it, because it's so in-depth, the story, and it's such, the more intelligent the psychopath, the more intelligent the mark is, because otherwise it's like playing chess with a toddler. They want to have somebody who's going to challenge them. And it wasn't that I meekly just went, oh, right, okay, you're a spy, go off and do what you want, and I'll just never say it. You know, it was complete brainwashing, and it was step by step, moment by moment, you know, continuously, you know, dragging me along through this process.
Wow.
So it's, and that's one of the things I wanted the book to do, is to show how that happens. So I didn't want it to be a thriller where you found out at the end. I wanted people to know from the very beginning so they can see it. So so they can actually see the process.
So that one of the first shocking things then is your first miracle baby.
Yeah.
Wow. So we know you called Mary. You're with a man who's infertile. We have a miracle.
We did, yes. And I was so convinced. This is what's so funny, is I was so convinced that he believed he was infertile. It wasn't, you know, because it was the very first email he sent me before we'd ever spoken or anything. And the first thing he said to me was that he was infertile and couldn't have kids. And if that was a problem, then, you know, that you're better to know up front. And, you know, so it was so inherent in our relationship. I actually went through my diary and looked to see whether I'd been out with my friends and had a drink and could have been roofied. You know, I thought, is this, you know, I knew I'd not consciously slept with someone else, but could somebody have slept with me somehow and impregnated me because he couldn't? And I just, you know, it was extraordinary. I really thought he was going to throw a wobbler because, you know, he'd think I'd had an affair. And I was actually really impressed that he didn't.
And was he delighted at this news, or shocked? Or
yeah, well, when I told him, he actually, I mean, this is what is so stunning. All the blood drained from his face for a start. He kind of leaned backwards, looked like he was going to pass out, and said, oh my gosh, you know, I was told it was like a 1 in a million chance, and that basically it was never possible. You know, sort of like, and then he kind of swept me up and said, you know, it's all you're just such a miracle worker, etc. But yeah, I mean, he physically turned white and, you know, sort of like, and looked stunned, you know, so it was, yeah.
And how many children had he fathered by this point that you know of?
That I know of to date is 14.
But at the point of your first pregnancy, how many?
Well, I think he had 7 at that stage, but both his wife and the wife's nanny were pregnant by him at the time he wrote the email to me saying that he was infertile.
Wow.
So, and the 14 that I know of now will be the tip of an iceberg, because those are the ones that have contacted me and said, I know that we've got the same father of our children in common. You know, so that there's, I reckon there's probably more likely to be 40. You know, because that's just the ones I know of.
So from infertile to 40 children. Wow.
Yeah. And his parents rang me to say how pleased they were to have their first grandchild. And they'd spent Christmas with the other wife and their 5 children and the nanny pregnant and everything else there. So, I mean, they knew what was going on, but they rang to say how pleased they were about their first grandchild.
So they were utterly complicit. It wasn't that he was hoodwinking them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether
Wow.
they did it because they were frightened of him, or they did it just to have a peaceful life, or whether they benefit from the money. I genuinely don't know. I've never spoken to them since finding out the truth. No desire to be honest.
So you were together 6 years, pregnant twice.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to be a factor, doesn't it? In the sense that when we're pregnant, we're at our most vulnerable, hormones all over the place.
I
Priorities
think that's
change.
I think that's why he tries to impregnate women. It's not because he's trying to have children. It's because it's a useful tool to manipulate the women. Partly because when I mean, this is one reason why I think the man's a psychopath. He doesn't have any emotional connection with his children, and he creates them to make sure that the woman is tired, the woman is tied to where she is, she's sleep deprived, she's more malleable, plus the fact that you will forgive the father of your children far more than you would forgive a boyfriend, whether you're married to them or not, because that's someone you see as needing to be in your life forever because they're the father of your child, so it's to him, they're a means into an end. So this is why he tells people he's infertile, because once you are engaged or settled with somebody, you don't use birth control if they're infertile, and therefore they're much more likely to get pregnant.
I have a vision of this man in a room somewhere. He's got a bunker and he must have sticky notes all over the place or a whiteboard to keep up with it all, because I'm rubbish at lying and I can't remember one to the next, but to keep so many secret lives. And then I got to the point in the book where he talks about the Phantom of the Opera, and I realised he does the same thing over and over again. Yeah. So do you want to explain the Phantom of the Opera?
Yeah. We went down to London and we were supposed to be going to see Les Miserables, which I absolutely love. And he said, no. Sort of like, something happened and we had to go to Phantom of the Opera instead, I think. So I might even get my wires crossed. But we went to Phantom of the Opera, and then afterwards we went to a Japanese restaurant. And when we walked into the Japanese restaurant, everybody in the restaurant sort of said hi to him. And I said, how do they all know you? And they kind of gave, he introduced me as his wife, and they kind of like, oh, nice to meet you, but there was a kind of funny look going on, and I said, how do they know you? And I come in here all the time and stuff like that. Anyway, so we had a lovely meal, everything else. When I started researching, when I found out the truth about him and I started researching everything else, I found out that he had taken both his wives and 5 of his fiancées to the Phantom of the Opera in 2005. And we'd all been to the same restaurant, and we'd all been introduced as the girlfriend or the wife or the fiancé, which is hence the funny look we got. But he'd been to, how many times has he been to the Phantom of the Opera? And as I say, these are the people I know. There will be other victims or the women. I know there are, because I've seen hotel receipts and flowers and stuff like that we don't know who they went to. So we know that there's others. And so it's like, but I think, with Phantom of the Opera, it's all about a man manipulating a woman. And so I do think, I wonder whether he's sort of thumbing his nose and going, well, you may be able to do it to one woman. Look how many I can do it to. Yeah. Where there's a little bit of that. But yeah, it's convenient for him, because you can then, if he mentions the Phantom of the Opera, then he doesn't slip up, because we've all been to see it with him. So absolutely. Yeah. So I think he doubles up on some things, but I think with him, it's the challenge. The biggest problem for psychopaths is the boredom. They don't have a reward structure like, excuse me, they don't have a reward structure like love and compassion and a hug from us, or petting the dog, or, etc. They don't get a reward structure from that. The only thing that they find as a reward structure is money, sex, and power. So having that challenge of getting close to being caught and then getting away from it again, that is what really excites him. So that's what keeps him on edge. That's what keeps him going.
And you mentioned the money. So, and at the start you were, you had a good job, you had your own house, no debts. Yeah. Life was good. By the time the killer call comes 6 years later, what was your financial situation like?
He took £198,000 from me, and he did it by telling me that unsavouries had found out his real identity and his home and his wife and his children, i.e. us, and that they were threatening to kidnap the kids and rip bits off them unless we came up with money. And they'd send the bits through the post to us just to make sure we knew what was going on. So we had to come up with money.
So what are unsavoury? Sorry, just in case people...
The unsavouries were, that was one of the things. It was all a little bit vague. But yeah, the unsavouries were people that had no problem flying up 2 planes into the Twin Towers in America. Okay. They were basically terrorists. But they needed funds. And so the way they did it was by blackmailing people. And blackmail is the wrong word, because blackmail is when you've done something wrong and they'll expose it. This was not actually kidnapping the kids, but basically threatening to do so. And they were people that we had no control over and couldn't report it to the police because it hadn't happened yet, etc. And after 4 years of being completely brainwashed by him, I believed that he was the only person I could trust. And if someone said it to me now and said, I'll kidnap your kids unless you give me money, I'd say, get lost. All right. But this was the only man I could trust, the only person I could talk to, and that's what the long con was, and I sold everything I owned. So I sold my flat, I sold my life insurance policy, I sold car, I sold anything I had. I had nothing. I was diving down the back of the couch to try and find money to buy milk. I was pitching up at my mum's house when I knew she'd be starting to cook dinner with the kids so that I could feed the kids.
But you lent money from your family, or borrowed rather money from your family, and then you then later found out he'd run up credit card debt.
Yeah, well, that was separate issue. Basically, he'd said get a credit card, so I got a credit card, and he'd got a spouse card on that, and he used that to then get various other credit cards by forging my identity. And so once he'd left, I discovered he'd run up £56,000 in debt on credit cards in my name. And so although I'd lost everything, I was also £56,000 in debt, which I hadn't even spent.
And finding yourself in court.
That's what was so sad. It was like I hadn't even spent the money. I didn't even get the fun of doing it, Didn't even gamble it away. I just gave it to someone, It's like, oh.
We've gone from November 2000. We're now up to the 5th of April 2006, and I've mentioned this killer phone call a couple of times, and it certainly is what your book starts with, because you start with the sort of halfway to the ending. What was the killer phone call, and how did you feel when you got it?
Well, it was. I think it was a school holiday, and I was getting the kids ready for a little trip out. And the phone call came in, and it was actually a woman who said, "Are you Mary Turner Thompson?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you also Mrs. Jordan?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I'm the other Mrs. Jordan." And then she said, "Have you been told I'm an agent?" And I said, "Yes," because I knew of an asset that he had that allowed him to come to the country in the first place, who was a fake wife. And she said, "I've been told you're an agent." And so basically it blew his story of her being an asset and a fake wife and stuff out the water. She jumped in the car and drove straight up to Edinburgh, and we sat and talked for 12 hours and compared notes. She showed me pictures of her children, and all his children look alike. So, you can tell that they're not, that they're siblings regardless. There was, I think there was five brothers. And out of the 5 brothers, it looks like my son at different stages of aging.
Oh, wow.
It's extraordinary. And the sisters as well looked exactly like my daughter. And my daughter had 3 siblings who were the same age as her. So, it was an extraordinary kind of this was the piece of information I needed, because before, as I say, it was like jumping the Grand Canyon in 2 bounds. It was all or nothing. Whereas this was the catalyst that threw me over the Grand Canyon and to the other side. So getting that phone call from her was like, the walls crumbling around me and reality suddenly stepping in again. And broke free of that brainwashing, and could see it all. And a weird thing, you said how did I react to it? Life was so awful by that stage. I had no money. I was living in fear of these people coming to kidnap the children. I hadn't even got home by that stage. I was keeping at my parents' house, aged 40, which is always a delight. It was a horrendous time. So actually getting the phone call and finding out there weren't people chasing us, there weren't people after us at all, it was actually a relief. It was a bit like getting a get out of jail free card. It was like, because I had made marriage vows to this man. I had said I would be with him for richer, for poorer, through sickness and in health. And I believed in those vows. And, I wouldn't have broken them. I would have, carried on trying because I had made that promise. And, but this actually showed me that the man that I had made that promise to didn't actually exist. The person he was pretending to be, wasn't real. So, yeah. So it was actually quite a relief that that part of the whole saga could be over. If that makes any sense,
It does. And there was another little element to this, wasn't there? Because you also found out that he was a convicted paedophile.
Yes.
And suddenly social services have entered your life as well.
Yes. That was fun.
So
they were incredibly helpful when they thought that I was still with him. They were really aggressive and quite, they made things a lot worse. But when I called them up and I said, look, I found out the truth. I now know the truth, and I kind of woken up, and it was like I'd been in a dream for years. I wasn't mentally sound. One of the things we actually worked out between us and the victims was we reckoned that he was actually drugging us as well. There are areas of our, of all of us that, we would wake up in the morning and, sort of like don't remember what happened the night before because we'd had a few glasses of wine, which I've never had before and since. So we reckon he was actually using the date rape drugs. But yeah, so it's sort of like having got in touch with social services and said, I now know the truth. They couldn't have been nicer. They were brilliant and they were so supportive and so helpful after that. And they came around and they assessed the children and made sure that they hadn't been abused as well, and they hadn't. So, that was that. They were just brilliant, absolutely brilliant after that. But yeah.
And just before we come to the end, because there's a couple of little bit, so many questions, Mary. You've got to read these books. But he did provide you with spooky evidence from some of these covert operations, didn't he? And you were watching TV one day and he told you about the Yasser Arafat announcement. Do you just want to explain that?
There was also Kenneth Bigley as well. There's Yasser Arafat. We were sitting watching. I was working, and we had two desks in an office at the house we lived in, and along the bottom of my screen I used to get the news alerts, and the news alert came up saying Yasser Arafat had died, and it was a specialist area of his, the Palestinian territories. So when he said, I went, oh gosh, Yasser Arafat's dead. And without looking up, he said, no, he's not. I would know if he was dead. And I said, it just said on the BBC. And he was saying, nope, hasn't happened. And about 2 or 3 hours later, the BBC reported they got it wrong. He wasn't dead. He'd had a stroke or a heart attack or something, had been rushed to hospital. And he did die within 2 weeks, but he hadn't died then. And it was like, I have no idea how he did that. And there was several things that he did that I just don't know. He was actually verifying, when he was working from home, he was verifying some of the video footage we were getting from Palestinian territories, from Afghanistan, places like that. And Kenneth Bigley, when he was reported as having been executed, and he had escaped, and Will had told me that he had escaped before it was on the news and stuff like that. And sort of like, so I don't know. But the thing is, you don't have to know how a magic trick is done to know it's not real magic.
No.
I don't know how he was getting that information. There is a lot that I wrote about in The Bigamist that I did find out, like how his feet were damaged. Because when he came back from the Palestinian territories one time, his feet were mangled and crushed because he hadn't been able to take his boots off for 3 months. And when some of the victims and I, we've actually got a Facebook group now.
Want to join it?
Just of his victims, but when we sort of compared notes and did a timeline, and what it turned out is actually he'd gone around wearing boots 2 sizes too small for him for 2 weeks before he came back to me. So you would have the physical evidence of his not being able to travel because of this problem.
Man alive. There's no aspect, is there, left unattended?
No. Oh, there's worse things he did to himself, which I'm not sure is up for public consumption. But I have actually, as I say, I've detailed them in The Psychopath. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote The Psychopath was because, having looked at Dr. Robert Hare's psychopath checklist revised, it's got a 20-question checklist. And I went through it and went, yes, 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 all the way through. And so, yeah, I sort of describe him as a psychopath because I reckon that. But actually, he's now been diagnosed in America by psychologists out there as well, who agree with me that he actually scores 40 out of 40 on the psychopath checklist. So he's not only a psychopath, he's one of the most prolific and pure psychopaths there are in the world.
Well, I'm glad to see, Mary, that you weren't conned by any old psychopath, but you were conned by the best.
Specialist, yes.
That must make you feel a whole lot better.
Oh, and I'll tell you what makes me feel better is actually not having him in my life. That makes me feel a lot better. And it's that a lot of people ask me why I'm so kind of positive about it and how I can laugh and just joke about this. And it's like I choose to be like the zebra that got away from the lion. The zebra, if it got caught and got away from the lion, wouldn't be going along going, oh no, I got caught by a lion. It would be going, I got away. And so that's what I do. I celebrate the fact that I am in control of my own life again. I can talk and I can say what I want to say. I'm not kept in silence, and I'm in control of my own destiny. I make my own choices, and it's one of the things about losing everything is it really makes you value anything you do have. And it's so yeah, that's I just celebrate life now.
Well, I don't know what to say other than thank you so much, first of all, for joining us. Just re-listening to it all again is like, it's just so fascinating the second time round as well. And I'm so pleased that you've written The Psychopath because there were lots of the boots question, actually, that went through my head going, wasn't he in Japan on holiday when he was meant to be with these mangled feet? How did he do that? So
no, he was in Oxford. He was in Oxford with his other wife, yeah.
Ah, right. How many wives were there altogether that you found so far?
He was married once in the USA that we know of, possibly twice. He was married in England 10 years before he married me. So we overlapped by 6 years. So he had 2 wives in 2005 and 5 fiancés, and he had 2 wives and 3 fiancés in 2006 when he was arrested. Wow. But he averages 4 or 5 women at once that we know of.
Gosh.
All the time. So
he must be exhausted.
Well, he doesn't work, that's what he does. Well, is he gets contracts and then says he's working and then doesn't do any work. He just bills them for it. So he has all the time that most people would be working to do all this. So yeah, that's how it works.
Well, it's so lovely to meet up with you again, and congratulations, because I believe your second book has whizzed up the charts, having slogged to get the first book out there. The second is zoomed.
Just went straight. It went straight into number 1 in the UK Kindle charts.
Wow!
And I think it went to number 7 in the US Kindle charts. And it's flying off the shelves, which is just absolutely wonderful. So, yeah.
And it is a fascinating story, and the fact that you're still uncovering, and the idea that there are probably more victims out there, and yeah. But your WhatsApp group sounds a busy group.
We do our best. Yes.
So Jacqueline has made reference to the iPad with all of your amazing questions on. Hopefully, she'll be able to read some of them. As we heard earlier from Mary, the Mary story is absolutely extraordinary, and I have genuinely bought the books and an extra one which was saying how to be a successful empath. Not actually sure what I bought, but it was offered to me as an extra, so I thought, yeah. So that's my next couple of weeks sorted, because I'm supposed to be having some time off, so I should be walking around Morrison's carrying a copy of The Bigamist.
So we've had, first of all, thank you. We've had loads of questions in. We've kind of developed a theme with some of them. So I'm going to sort of lump some together, and then because there's quite a few that are asking kind of similar things. But to answer the first question, read The Bigamist first. You need to read The Bigamist to understand the psychopath. The second is Hank, my son. Yours is a bit too random, and I hope you've not been at the Sherry because it's weird. And I'm not reading that one out.
Isn't he supposed to be looking after your dog?
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, he's... Anyway. So the first one, or the first couple, are around your children. So let's see, how did you explain your ex's behaviour to your children? Because after all, they're the innocent party in this. And do the children meet up each other? So that's the larger family, let's say. And how do they cope knowing what their father did?
Okay, so that's three questions. First, how did I tell my children? Okay, so I explained to my children that if their father was blind, they wouldn't blame themselves that he couldn't see them. So I explained that he's a psychopath and he doesn't actually have a chemical empathic response. He doesn't have the capacity to love. So it's not their fault that he can't love them. And they grew up knowing and understanding about psychopaths. So we're able to actually talk and express and communicate. And, so as a result, any of them have any issues with regard to him being a psychopath at all. In fact, they rather enjoy telling people about the books and stuff like that. I remember one of my daughters actually went to school on World Book Day where they had to dress up as their favourite character from a book, and she went dressed as herself.
Brilliant!
Because she was in the book, and it's like the teacher's always like, not sure that's allowed, and she was like, well, technically it's in the rules, I'm in the book. So, and then the other two questions: how do they feel now? Do they meet up with the others? They have done. Some of the children know each other, some of them don't. I mean, there's 14 that we now know of worldwide. As I say, so. It's there'll be more. There'll be throughout their lives. They'll have people, knocking on the door or proverbially getting in touch and going, "I've just found out you're one of my X number of brothers and sisters." So, one of the things was when it first happened, I'd seen enough EastEnders to know that if I didn't tell them, one day someone was going to come back saying, oh Mum, I've met this lovely person and we've got together and we're pregnant, and then they'd find out they were half brothers or sisters. So it was kind of like there wasn't really much choice. I had to make sure that they knew the situation. And
Blimey, does that happen on EastEnders? I've got to start watching that. Sorry, Mary.
You just always know if somebody keeps a secret on a soap, that it's going to come back and bite them. And it's
and
like,
then the duffs are coming.
Yeah, it's just better not to. Don't keep it. I mean, the lovely thing about having no skeletons in your closet, is there's nothing worrying you. You're not anxious about anything coming up behind you and just going, oh no, they found that out. It's like, no. It's like just open book, literally, out there. So I can't remember what the third question was with regard to his children.
Oh, neither can I now. I've moved on. Hold on, let me go back. You've explained it.
They do see some of the other children. Some of the children, some of the mums don't want the children to know. So one I know told her daughter that her father's dead. I think that's a mistake, because that's going to, when she does find out, say, doing an ancestry DNA thing or something, that she's got all these siblings, then, she's going to be angry with her mother as well for being lied to. So I think that's a mistake. But, that's each to their own. Each mother has to do their own thing. So
it's hard, isn't it? I think, but you've always told your children the truth. Yes. About life in general. So this is a very natural phenomenon for you, isn't it, to do this? Yeah.
Well, it was one of the things having been as those that read The Psychopath will find. I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse when I was young, which again is no problem. I resolved that in my own how I feel about that. But one of the things I did research was when I had children is that psychopaths, paedophiles actually target children who can't talk scientifically about sex. So, if they don't know the right words to use. So I did always, from the very beginning with my children, use all the right words, and I was just open with them, was just straightforward with them, because it's a way of protecting them from harm. So, so I've always been very open with my children, and they know they can talk to me about anything because they know I talk to them about anything. So
there's another tip for you.
Yeah.
Stop talking about your foo-foo. Talk about it properly.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, but I only use that as part of a chat-up line. I don't use it with the kids.
I worry about your chat up lines, I really do.
Yeah, so do I. That's why I bought your books.
So the next cluster of questions are around if you suspect or know that someone you know, or someone in your family or a friend, that they're actually going through what you went through,
Yeah.
but they refuse to believe this is happening. Two questions really. How did your family group deal with it, and did you say no, you don't understand? And what advice would you give to that family group now?
Yeah. Okay. My family group were included in his con. He managed to actually sit down with my family and explain to them what was going on. So my brother actually got my ex, Will Jordan, hammered. So drunk, he had like alcohol poisoning, and he still stuck to his story. And after that, my brother believed him. So he managed to reel in my family as well. So yeah, it's sort of like it's a strange one. There were a few friends who were like, we know there's something odd going on, but we don't know what. But they trusted that I knew what was going on, and so, they didn't sort of raise any issues. But yeah, what would I say to if you know somebody else is going through it? The first rule of any abuser is keep your victim silent. Isolate them, keep them silent. So the first thing they will try and do is drive a wedge between the victim, the mark, and their friends and family. So quite often they'll turn around and say, oh, your best friend made a pass at me. And because they do that, you don't want to sort of approach the best friend with why did you do that? And even if you do, they'll deny it because it didn't happen. And it drives a wedge between you and that person, so you don't have that person to talk to. It was actually very funny once that Will Jordan actually turned around to me and said that my sister had made a pass at him. And I killed myself laughing and went, no, she didn't. Because I know my sister well enough to know that she wouldn't. So it was literally just blanked straight away. But he had sort of said, the little things, like that somebody had said, that he didn't know what to say because somebody had said something nasty about me behind my back. That is all stuff trying to drive wedges between you and the people that you might talk to. So as a friend who's seeing someone go through it, just make sure they can't drive that wedge. So no matter what your friend says to you, don't take it personally, don't get upset, because they're not dealing with it on the information that you think they are. Yeah, so keep the line of communication open, keep that line of escape open. It's like dealing with somebody who's in a cult. So you just have to say, look, this is a difficult time they're going through. Keep the door open, keep communication open, and just sort of allow them to carry. That they will come out of it eventually, and just be there for them when they do. That's what I would say.
Okay, so at your lowest ebb and before the what we call the killer phone call, but before you knew that it was all nonsense. Because it was life was pretty awful coming up to that point. Did you ever? This is quite a hard question to ask. But okay. Did you ever get to the point where you thought, I can't cope with this anymore, and you would take your own life, or that you could see no ending to it?
Yes and no. Yes, I did get to that stage where I thought this was awful and incredibly painful. No, I would not have taken my own life because I wouldn't have done that to my kids. I'm one of the things that amazes me is when you become a mother, you start wearing a seatbelt, not because it's the rules, but because you have a responsibility to stay alive. Because those children depend on you. So, no, I wouldn't have taken my own life. I, however, did self-harm. So it got to a point once I was just so bad that I actually, I'd got up in the middle of the night once again, having heard noises, and I'd gone around the house, searched the house, thinking that there were people in the house coming to get the kids. And I was in such emotional pain. I took a carving knife and I stuck it in my arm, and I just ran it down my arm. And I mean, it wasn't that deep, it wasn't that nasty, but it left a scar. And I've got on my arm, I've got this sort of silver scar that runs down my arm. And every time I saw it, I felt that pain again. And so a couple of years ago, I went and I got a tattoo, and it's like, so it's, I don't know if you can see this.
Oh yeah, what's it of?
But it's actually it's the wrong way round for a camera. But basically, it's a quill, which is my writing. It's my black belt, because I got a black belt in Taekwondo to make myself feel physically stronger, and it's my 3 children. So I mean, it's just really hard on my to show you on the camera. But yeah, so every time I look at my arm now, I see my black belt, my writing, and my 3 children. So yeah, it's a really kind of, so now when I look at my arm, I don't see that pain. I see the things I'm proud of.
Oh, Mary,
So-
we're running out of time, and I'm so sorry, because we could sit all afternoon. But lots of comments coming in, as well as questions, saying that they really admire your resilience. They love the zebra analogy, and you know what. To come and be able to tell your story is phenomenal. So let me plug your books again, because it's The Bigamist first, really readable, brilliant. Then it's A Psychopath, which sort of answers some of the questions you'll have. And you can see in my copy how many, bits of paper, and these were all like questions, because actually this happened 20 years ago. So it's a bit like you're in the 1940s and somebody says in 20 years' time we'll be landing on the moon.
You just said she was in the 1940s.
No,
She's
no,
not
no.
saying you're old, Mary.
No, it's like saying
All
you're in
right.
the 1940s.
I am old, so it's fine,
And we're going to put a man on the moon in 20 years' time. So, that 20 years is phenomenal. Mary, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
Just next time I'm in Scotland, we'll...
Oh, yes, definitely.
Bit whiskey.
Definitely.
Take care, Mary.
Thank you.
Bye.